Allison Mack.
She has been charged with sex trafficking.
The FBI arrested the group's leader, as well as Allison Mack. Over several months, a number of charges were laid, including sex trafficking, forced labor, and racketeering conspiracy. And all hell broke loose.
Mack was with the alleged cult leader when he was arrested in Mexico.
Well, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed your holiday weekend. We did ourselves here at Cuticast TV. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe, like, and best of all, share this video. We are still shadow banned by YouTube on there, and support us on our other social media platforms where we have exclusive content on ODYSEE and BitChute. Well, we've been covering a little bit of this a little bit at a time as the information was coming out. You knew about the sex cult led by Keith Raniere.
NXIVM has been called a terrifying cult, a sex cult, a pyramid scheme, and even a group bent on world domination.
Back in October 2020, he was convicted and sentenced to 120 years for his role in this cult. And now we have found out the fate of actress Allison Mack, who was a character on the hit Smallville series, which I enjoyed. Didn't like the last 2 seasons of it, but it was a good show. She had a great character. Could have been spinned off into the new Arrowverse, which they tried to in some way, but at the same time they looked like they were going to try to, and she was mentioned. This came up. So now we found out, according to the Associated Press, she has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. How an actress has fallen. I mean, this is just, oh man, this is just depressing in itself. You know, you have an actress of her talent. She could have gone far, but yet, you know, she allowed herself. This is Hollywood. This is Hollywood itself. Hollywood is a, you know, a lot of the Hollywood celebrities are in cults. You know, there are certain actors, and you know the name, and you know, if I mention it, I'll probably get investigated by that particular cult. According to the Hollywood Reporter, Mack wrote in a letter in which she expressed that she was sorry for the pain that her actions caused others, and apologized for having exposed the victims to Keith Raniere's nefarious and emotional abuse schemes. It is now of a paramount importance for me to say, from the bottom of my heart, I am sorry, wrote the actress. Mack letters continues, I threw myself into the teachings of Keith Raniere with everything I had. I believe wholeheartedly that his mentorship was leading me to a better, more enlightened version of myself. I devoted my loyalty, my resources, and utterly my life to him, she added. This was the biggest mistake and regret of my life. The actress further elaborated, I'm sorry for those of you that I brought into NXIVM. I am sorry I ever exposed you to the nefarious and emotional abusive schemes of a twisted man. I am sorry that I encouraged to use your resources to participate in something that was ultimately so ugly. I do not take lightly the responsibility I have in the lives of those I love, and I feel a heavyweight guilt for having misused your trust, leading down your negative path, read Mack's letter. You know, this is on reading off Abounding into Comics, which had a good take on this. You know, when you're in Hollywood and you have all this money, you know, and you know the Seagram's heiress is also involved in this as well. You know, when you start freaking branding people, I mean, that should be the sign alone that you need to get the fuck out, because basically, you know, it's a danger. You know, there's a lot of these guys. We've seen these cults grow in this country before. It's not the first. You know, you can go all the way back to Jim Jones. You know, how tragic was that? You know, you got people, especially if you notice, most of the stuff is on the West Coast. Not saying there's no crazy nuts on the East Coast, but you notice it's always in the Hollywood, specifically, you know, Manson, and Rainier and many others that have dealt blows to Hollywood, creating cults. I mean, there's one big one out there right now that, you know, that basically is kept in business, that, you know, it's used money and Hollywood to keep itself in business. You know, this is something that's always been going on. And like I've said many times, Hollywood is burning, it's ashes. It's completely burnt to ashes. Because and you see this from the ideology of what are they putting into movies throughout the last decade or so. You know, all this wokeness, political agendas, check marking everything, make sure it has diversity and this and that, which we needed none of this at all. Quentin Tarantino came out recently that basically it's, you know, it's political, it's ideology, not art anymore in Hollywood. Because that's what Hollywood was. It was art. It's an artistic expression. And this has been happening all, you know, I just caught over the holiday weekend the Tomorrow War. Not the greatest movie in the world, not the greatest, but a hell of a lot better than what Hollywood has been putting out lately. You know, I would say it's like the, if I have to call how I can describe the Tomorrow War, it would be sort of like the B films that you would catch on the video shelf back in the 80s and 90s. You know, those movies you're like, well, should I rent it? I don't know. And it turns out to be okay. You know, it's got some good action. It's got, you know, a good premise, but a lousy script. A lousy script, some good acting. You know, you have some of those movies out there that, you know, that are made this way, and it's tolerable and they're okay to watch, you know, once or twice. You know, and then there are others that you just like, they're really bad, and one time around, and you can say, hey, hell, I watch it. You know, that's why that's that old saying, you know, why did they make Snakes on a Plane? Because they needed to make Snakes on a Plane. It just never existed before. You know, it's something new, something bold. Wasn't the greatest movie in the world, but everybody went to go see it. It was like, I want to go see Snakes on the Plane. But getting back to Allison Mack, I mean, this is a girl who played Chloe Sullivan in the Superman Smallville series. She was arrested in 2018 for this. You know, this was starting to look like Manson, really. I mean, if you remember the Manson stories and stuff like that, if you've never seen the Helter Skelter movie, which is a great movie. If you want to learn about Charlie Manson, Helter Skelter is one of the best movies to watch. It was a mini-series movie that was made back in 1976. Steve Railsback starred as Charlie Manson and did a great job of this. It's well worth seeing. I think it's on Prime. No, it's not. No, it's not. I'm mistaken. I'm sorry, but it's based on the book from Vincent Bugazzi. I'm sorry if I pronounce his name. Who was involved in the case, and it was very well done. I mean, if you also not seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, even though the story is diverted somewhat, but you could see how people in that time period were just easily, you know, that basically they were controlled and made to do things for one particular person, and this is what happens on there, and this is what happens when it contains Hollywood and when it contains money. This is something it's a major situation. And why Hollywood does this? Well, it's because basically, you know, you have a certain group of people, and it's not all liberals. It's not all liberals, but it's a good, as they say, radical liberals out there, and there are some conservatives that are involved as well. You know, you could say it comes from both ends in one way or another, but mostly on the far left. It's mostly the far left out there. Because one thing is, if you look at California politics, you know, it's bounced to one type of state, and this is why there's so many problems over there, and this is why it's infected It's infected the movies and television for that reason. This is why the independent, I think was it Tarantino that said it or somebody else? I think we're going to go through another renaissance again. And I said this too. We're going to go through another renaissance of the 80s and 90s all over again. Because what happens is, what happened those time periods, you know, Hollywood was changing again. You know, we went through the 40s, the 50s, the censorship boards and stuff like that through those time periods. And, you know, movies were starting to change in the 60s and 70s. You know, we're looking for the next Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, you know, George Lucas. We're looking for the next ones that are going to be of that quality caliber. And it's going to come from the small screen. It's going to come from the smaller production. And that's how it was. You know, if it wasn't for the small production, we wouldn't have companies like Miramax and New Line Cinema out there. We wouldn't have them. You know, this is where we're headed for. But we have to clean the slate of people like this that are influencing Hollywood the way they're doing today. Those Hollywood influencers that just basically says, we got to do it this way. It's either we do it this way or nothing at all, you know, and get rid of everybody else. You know, and people like Allison Mack, you know, follows them blindly into the night. I mean, this guy had slave women. Think about that for a minute. Think about that. You know, you hear all these stories and stuff like that. Say, oh no, it can't happen here. Can't happen here. Well, it has happened, and it has to be taken care of. You know, these groups need to go away. You know, you might say, well, that's a, you know, freedom of speech issue and stuff like that. There's a fine line when it comes to freedom of speech. You could say freedom of speech, but when you do what this guy did, that's what's the next level? You know, sacrifice, human sacrifice. You know, there are many great films in history and great TV series. A lot of those actors, unfortunately, fallen to the persuasion of devils. And it continues today in Hollywood. And, you know, this is why. And the thing about it is, everything is done by Twitter or social media. You know, that's you know, they think that is the new courtroom, that basically justice is served by Twitter. And we have one of our exclusive videos off to the side on BitChute and Odyssey is going to be discussing a little bit into the Bill Cosby release and how in some ways it mirrors another case that was major in the papers decades ago. And do catch that. We have that coming up this week as well. So you've reached this part of the video. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, share this video. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye now.
Just a few? Well, there are many, many more. And they're running in the streets. They're all running in the same direction. And they're running right at you.
And I've always sought an end to toil and misery. If it can't be given, it has to be achieved. There is hope. But it has to come from inside.
Wow.
From man, from himself.
Cool. James Arness. We'll be back in Sweetbacks.
No, Peter Graves.
Ha ha ha.